All right, here's a story with a lot of national attention we've covered for the last couple of days. The NCAA updating its policy on transgender student athletes following controversy over swimmer Leah Thomas, who is dominating on the women's swim team at the University of Pennsylvania. Thomas was born a biological male. Transgender athletes wishing to compete will now need to document their testosterone levels in compliance with their specific sport. Track athlete Chelsea Mitchell, who was part of the first lawsuit over transgender policy in sports, and her attorney, Kristen Waggoner, join us in just a moment. But first, Mike Tobin is with us live. And Mike, I read through this, and it's still pretty complicated.
Well, you know, John, the NCAA Board of Governors pretty much decided not to decide as they voted to sync up with the Olympic rules. And that means the rules governing transgender competition will be decided sport by sport. The national governing body of each sport will ultimately make the rules. Now, the NCAA does dictate that for the rest of 2022, testosterone levels will need to be documented 4 weeks before the championships. And then for next school year, testosterone levels will be checked several times during the season. Olympic gold medalist Caitlyn Jenner is one who supports transgender people, but thinks that transgender female athletes have an unfair advantage. She says athletes who transition to female still have bigger hands and bigger cardiovascular systems than their competition.
I feel sorry for the other athletes that are out there, especially at Penn or anybody she's competing against, because in the woke world, you got to say, oh my gosh, this is great, and on and on and on. No, it's not. We need to protect women's sports.
The case of Penn swimmer Leah Thomas put transgender women in the spotlight. She competed for the first 3 years in college on the men's team. After transitioning, she has been dominant competing with women. She broke the records at Penn in the 200-meter freestyle. She finished a solid 2 seconds ahead of her opponents and threatens the NCAA record. About 80% of Olympians are in the NCAA or it came through college competition. So there really is an almost direct path to how this will impact our Olympic program. John?
You know, and there's science out there, too, Mike, that even if you get testosterone levels down, that the natural advantage that males gain during puberty never really goes away. So we'll see how well this lasts, given the test of time. Mike Tobin for us. Mike, thank you. Sandra?
Let's bring in Chelsea Mitchell, a collegiate athlete who, as a high schooler, sued several Connecticut districts and the state's athletic conference to stop trans athletes from competing in women's sports. Mitchell was the first case challenging transgender policies in athletics. She's joined by her attorney, Kristen Waggoner. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us. Kristen, I'll get to that lawsuit in just a moment and where that went and what options girls now have based on these changes. But Chelsea, to you first. Do these rules address your concerns? You're now a college athlete. You filed that lawsuit when you were competing in high school. Did they go far enough? Does this satisfy you?
No, it doesn't. It's really disappointing. In high school, I raced against transgender athletes all 4 years of my high school career, and I lost 4 state championships, 2 All New England awards, and countless other opportunities to advance and compete. And it's really disappointing that the NCAA didn't take this opportunity to stand up and protect women and girls.
You know, and I put the breakdown of the new policy up on the screen to take people through this. As John mentioned, Kristen, it is rather complicated, really, what they've decided to do here. But they do back themselves up with the fact that this follows the policies of the U.S. and International Olympic Committees, the trans participation determined by individual sports governing bodies. So as Mike Tobin put it, this puts it off to the individual sports. The trans athletes are now required to document sport-specific testosterone levels before championship selections. So, Kristen, you go back to the point that they have said they have to go through the hormone treatment. It's years of it, as Leah Thomas did, and prove it. So why is that not enough?
Well, they're saying that essentially they're going to make no decision and defer to other governing bodies. And there isn't one U.S. governing body that has stood up for women. There's no amount of hormone suppressants that can overcome the physical advantages that a man has over a woman. The NCAA should be ashamed of themselves today, and they have violated their legal obligations they have to student female athletes.
Well, there are certainly many calls for reevaluation at this point. Chelsea, Caitlyn Jenner joined us on this program yesterday. Here's more of what she had to say. Listen.
She was born a biological boy. She was raised as a biological boy. Her cardiovascular system is bigger. Her respiratory system is bigger. Her hands are bigger. She can swim faster. That's a known. All of this woke world that we're living in right now is not working. I feel sorry for the other athletes.
Chelsea, what did you think when you heard that?
I mean, I completely agree. These biological differences are why we have sex-separated sports, and the obvious is very. The advantage is very obvious. Racing against these transgender athletes, it's just the difference is uncomparable.
Chelsea, it reminded me of when we first heard about your story, and you published a very emotional piece in USA Today. I was the fastest girl in Connecticut, you wrote, during your high school years, but transgender athletes made it an unfair fight. How do you feel like you can address this issue by also not sounding like you're not compassionate towards those who might feel like they don't find their place? Somebody who has made the transition, in this case, to a female, but they might not find a proper place to compete. What do you say to those who challenge you on that point?
Well, sports is all about fairness, and it isn't fair to put a biological male in the female category, and that's why we have sex-separated sports. And of course, there's a place for everyone in sports, but the question is, where is it most fair? And it isn't fair to have these transgender athletes in the female category.
And I know you're competing at the collegiate level now. We wish you the absolute very best. Kristen, a real quick final thought from you. Do you believe this will be reevaluated? Do you believe that the individual sports were pressed for more change from the NCAA?
I think Caitlin was right that these woke mobs are trying to engage in cancel culture, but the law requires the NCAA to stand up for women. And it's not just about who wins the races. We're talking about women pushed off the podium, but also not even getting a place on the playing field. And that's wrong.
We will continue following this story. Really appreciate your time on that, Chelsea and Kristen. Thank you.